Get ready to plunge into the electrifying world of tech news with the Next Tech Check podcast. Hosted by SmartTech Research's Mark Vena and Next Curve's Leonard Lee. This podcast offers bold insights, controversial debates, and monitors the pulse of innovation. It's the only podcast committed to keeping what's next in tech in check.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vena, CEO and Principal Analyst at SmartTech Research. And I'm here with Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst and founder of Next Curve. And welcome to the Next Tech Check podcast. Today is Monday, January 13th, 2025. We're also joined today by Francis Sideco, Partner and Principal Analyst at Tirias Research. The focus of today's podcast is recapping CES 2025. I can start it off by saying that the gift of CES for me this year was getting terribly sick. On day 3, I made it through the end of Thursday. And part of it was, and we all know this, CES is kind of an incubator for disease. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm about 90% better. But I don't think there's ever been a CES I've gone to where people haven't gotten sick. You can't help it. It actually, the show this year got a pretty good number. I was actually surprised the 141,000 number that's been. It didn't seem like 141,000, right, Leonard? Francis, what were your thoughts?
Well, I think it's because of how spread out it is. I mean, between the 3 halls at the convention center, and then the Venetian, and then some companies had things at other hotels, so it was pretty spread out.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, the old measure was kind of like Uber waits. You know, can you get into a good restaurant? You know, without making the reservation 3 weeks in advance. But I didn't see it. I was surprised at 141,000. But I think, Francis, you're probably correct. What do you think, Leonard?
Yeah, I thought about the same. It was easy to get around, which is really odd. And I did think that maybe the attendance was smaller than last year. I thought last year was a little bit more active. But I think it depended hall to hall. I think things are shifting, which is the interesting thing about showing up at CES every year, even though there are folks out there who think, nothing really changes. Oh, there's no innovation. But you don't really need to have innovation to see something interesting or an interesting dynamic playing out that year for the industry. So
no, we're going to talk about. There were some big announcements. There's going to be. Certainly, I saw some innovative things,
So Leonard, just a quick check. I did pull it up. It was slightly more, not a lot more, but it was slightly more. It was 138 the last year, 141 and change this year. There was a big jump from 23 to 24 from 115. So I think that's probably just the ramp up coming out of COVID and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember not so fondly of that CES that was kind of like after COVID started. They thought it went away, and that was awful. I mean, wasn't that the show where there was a big, I forget who the company was, they literally pulled out the day before, and they had this huge booth.
Yeah.
I forget who it was.
No, that was MWC, Ericsson.
Yeah.
The
lines were on the show floor,
It was ignoring what was happening in Wuhan.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway,
pandemic what? Yeah.
Well, enough of the trivialities here. Let's talk about some of the things that caught our attention. I will say right off the bat, there's a client, and I'm fully explaining this. There's a client that I do a little bit of work with, X Things. They have a number of different smart home brands, one of which is Ultralock. Ultralock's been a very, very popular smart lock brand. They won a whole slew of awards for what I think is a very cool smart lock. It will be first smart lock on the market that has ultra wideband and NFC built into it. And not just a couple awards. They won a Best of Show award. They got an award from Tom's Hardware page. A number of other awards that I'm completely forgetting at the moment. But that was kind of cool to see that. The one thing that I do want to tee up that was kind of interesting. It was the first CES that I've gone to in a number of years that, and I'm piling on. I want to be careful. Intel just didn't seem. They were there. They gave a keynote. I didn't go to it. I wasn't invited. I watched it after the fact. I wasn't blown away, but Intel just didn't figure into the mix, you know.
Mm.
Let me start, Francis. What do you think?
Yeah, before pre-show, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on pre-show, like Monday and or Sunday and Monday. By the end of Monday, I felt like I was already done, and the show hadn't even officially started.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
started
true.
on Tuesday. But on Monday, Intel actually did have kind of a side event that they did right after that keynote that they had. They had a few things. One of the big things that they talked about actually, obviously, Lunar Lake is the big AI PC SoC that they had
Yeah.
already released, and there's units out there. Arrow Lake is coming up next, which technically was still kind of a derivative of the Meteor Lake architecture. But the one after Lunar Lake, which is actually doing really good across multiple tests, our tests, a bunch of our other colleagues' tests out there, other counterparts from other analyst firms in terms of power and performance and so forth. The next one after that is Panther Lake, which they actually announced at the show as going to be available towards the second half of this year, I believe. And that's the first one that's going to be based on 18A on their 18A process. Um, and they actually showed in kind of a demo room 3 units that were based on a very pre-alpha version of Panther Lake, but it was running the OS, it was doing its thing. So that was actually kind of a proof point to me that 18A, regardless of what you might hear out there, 18A is actually on track. It looks like to be able to support Panther Lake in AI PCs. So that was good to see.
Yeah, really good.
And Francis, and I have no doubt that, I mean, I have gotten a couple of Lunar Lake units, and they look really nice, frankly, from a performance standpoint. So I think they are certainly showing some proof points with the new process, with the fact that they can be in the same conversation of an Apple Silicon type of PC without being laughed at. They're not these new Lunar Lake products are actually very, very good. I was talking more thematically, and I want to get Leonard's reaction to this. They just don't seem part of the dialogue anymore, and it's kind of a shame because they are making some. I think they are showing some progress, and they've had some turmoil with Pat Gelsinger resigning a couple of months ago. But it's more to me a more thematic thing than anything else. Leonard, I'll make it your reaction. Maybe I'm being too hard.
No, you know what? I think they were present. It was just not in the forefront like maybe others have been, in particular AMD. I think AMD came in hard and they didn't pull any punches. But that being said, when you did go to the OEM events, it was all about Lunar Lake. There was hardly mention of anybody else. You notice that?
Yeah.
And so it's pretty clear that Intel is working their channel advantage. And they, as you guys have already mentioned, they have a product that is very competitive. And so although it may not be leading, it definitely in certain dimensions that, we've covered on my podcast with Dave Altavia, as well as Jim of Tirias Research, Jim McGregor. The Lunar Lake came in with a bet that I think really paid off. And again, Jim will always remind us these design decisions were made a long time ago, which is absolutely true. These are all gambles, and they just happen to land, and certain things have been accelerated in a way that positions actually Intel quite strong for 2025. And if 18A it comes in and they ramp up and are able to support, like what Francis said, Panther Lake, then that roadmap for all of its shortcomings, because 20A was deprecated, and its challenges, ultimately it looks like Intel is going to land somewhere pretty nice in 2025, both on the foundry side as well as on product, at least for client, right? And so that's a good starting point for Intel to reconstitute itself. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe MJ didn't want to draw too much attention to a lot of this stuff, but she was definitely there. I bumped into her a few times, actually, even though I didn't attend the Intel session because I didn't get the invite.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I was surprised too.
Anymore.
We shouldn't take that personally. And
they did have a thing in the Sphere where they took over the Sphere for up with a big Intel globe thing. So,
but I do want to get back to one thing that you mentioned, Francis, is that AMD, on the other hand, there was a big announcement. And you used the right exact phrase. Their announcements, they came at things hard. And not only that, is that as someone who spent many years as an employee at Dell, I was taken back, frankly, when Sam Bird, my old boss, that I used to work for at Dell many moons ago, came on stage and announced the fact that their commercial enterprise line of client products are going to embrace now new AMD chips. And that, and again, the average person may not know that. That is a shocker because Dell has been, first of all, Dell has significant share in the enterprise and corporate market. And that was kind of the last bastion of, we have 100% of Dell's business in this space. It's not true, of course, on the consumer side, but I was floored at that. And to me, that speaks two things, not just about AMD's technology and they have they want to Dell wants to give more choice, which is the way Sam positioned it to their corporate clients, but it also tells me about their relationship with Intel. A lot of that they just felt that the timing is right. That hey, if we're going to make a call, we want to do this that while Intel's maybe in the position that they're in. So interesting things to me. I mean, what was your reaction, Leonard, to that? To that?
I thought it was interesting, but I mean, announcements are interesting and they're fun. They make for great headlines. But you know what? There's so many of these things. I really don't care. Show me the numbers and the result. I mean, I think that's really much more important. We can always surmise what is the underlying motivation for making a certain type of partnership. Yeah, no doubt. It's interesting. Okay. But I think with any kind of partnership, there needs to be an actual a translation of that press release into something material. And so that's what I'll wait for. Yeah, it's a cool announcement, but beyond that, let's wait and see. And I think that goes with a lot of the things that have been announced at CES in regards to the AI PC. Which I mean, I frankly, the impression that I'm getting across the board is with the AI PC, everyone's still trying to figure it out. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not. You might want to not take their word for it. Let's be kind.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So to me, what these announcements tell me is that a particular competitor or supplier is competitive. They have a seat at the table. They have good products that the OEMs have felt allows them to then provide or to then do some investment on. Okay, and to Leonard's point, that's actually that's an interesting and important thing to understand that somebody has a horse in the race. That's great. But yeah, absolutely. At that point, then it is a competition, and the competition is everything from performance and battery life and all that stuff. But it's everything up the stack too, including whatever, especially in enterprise and commercial. All of the tools that are available for IT management to go utilize, but also then up into the other like use cases and applications that certain enterprises need. for for their day-to-day stuff. So the other thing, so we'll see how now Intel and AMD look in that area. But the other thing about your comment on AI PC, Mark, is I think one thing to understand when you start hearing AI PC numbers. I think MJ from Intel has said something along the lines of like 300,000 or 300 million, sorry, units of AI PCs. One thing to understand is the PC, whether it's AI or not, has its upgrade cycles, right? So when you see these AI PCs, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are buying the AI PC for AI. It could
Right.
just mean that they're
No,
ready.
no.
They're ready
Francis,
to
Francis,
upgrade.
you're making a brilliant point that I've made over and over again, is that just because something is they're adding a feature and people are buying it, especially in the PC space, that doesn't mean necessarily, especially when the entire market becomes AI PCs, that doesn't mean they're buying them because they're AI PCs. That's the only thing that's available. Well, those
Well,
represents.
you're gonna want the latest and greatest, right? And then there's obviously
Yeah,
some
but the
parts.
reality is that most of the offerings, I would say 90% of the SKUs out there right now are AI PCs.
But what it does do though, what it does do is it lays the groundwork there for for an installed base of AI capable PCs, right?
Yes.
And I think the next wave that I'm looking at is, and I've spoken with the Intels, the AMDs, the Qualcomms, even the OEMs. The next wave is going to be, what's the developer community going to do with that hardware capability?
Yes.
And
Yes.
every single one of them, the OEMs and the chipset suppliers, all have very aggressive developer engagement initiatives to try to ensure that AI-based apps that take advantage of these capabilities are going to start hitting the market. And that's what I expect to see in 2025. And if we start seeing that, both from a commercial and an enterprise uh, sorry, both from an enterprise commercial standpoint and a consumer standpoint, and we start seeing these AI-based apps really hitting the market and taking advantage of it and being useful, that's what's going to help then drive that second wave of AI PC purchasing.
Yeah. And a lot of this will probably be really unsexy, stuff that will probably be so esoteric most consumers will just not even care about it. But
Correct. Yes.
what we're probably going to see is what we've seen XPUs do for ages now, which is CPU offload. It'll take a certain kind of workload, take it off a CPU, and then put it into a low power, power efficient zone with a more efficient AI processing unit, which is the MPU. And so, we've seen examples from Qualcomm as well as Intel at their respective events last year, where you had certain partners that were doing exactly that. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to boil down to battery life. And as far as these other types of applications that are more snazzy and can give you that wow factor, I think those are still mysteries at the moment. I think that's the best way you can describe it. Even though I have seen some things at a feature function level that are pretty cool, it's nothing that's going to shatter everyone's thinking about how revolutionary generative AI on devices.
Yeah, I mean, less on the consumer side, but on the commercial enterprise side, one of the things that I am seeing that I think will really make an impact is the real-time live translation capabilities on PCs. I think that helps a lot in a enterprise use case.
Now, the one company I do want to bring up, because they certainly were at CES, a lot of marketing signage and client that we're all very familiar with, was Qualcomm. I mean, Qualcomm, I think it's fair to say that last year was a good year for Qualcomm. They certainly established themselves as a very credible player in the PC space. They've made enormous strides, and I think their X Elite uh, silicon is really, really, has put a tremendous amount of pressure, and I think and it's been good for the market, frankly, in introducing form factors of battery life that is truly, stunning when you can compare that to the likes of Apple Silicon. What were your thoughts? I mean, maybe looking back at 2024 from a Qualcomm perspective. Francis, can I let you comment on that part of the
Yeah,
discussion?
as far as CES was concerned, they didn't have any new announcements. I think
Correct.
this year for Qualcomm is really about ramping up, and converting their design wins that they've had up and down. I mean, they have spread out their portfolio. So you got the X Elite at the top, but they now have tiered options for their OEM partners to go up and down the tiers.
Exactly.
So, and
Right.
that's exactly what they needed to do in order for OEMs to go ahead and continue to invest development dollars and um, marketing dollars to that platform. So I think 2025, what I'm looking at for them is how they're converting that. And I don't think anybody, even Qualcomm, expects that it's going to happen at the drop of a hat. It's going
Right.
to be a ramp. And so what we're looking for is then, that kind of steady market share, wins that hopefully is converting from the design wins.
Right. No, I agree with that observation, and they certainly this year they will have to refresh their X Elite stuff to see if they can stay in the ball game because the market doesn't stand still. But Leonard, any reflections that you have, because there wasn't really any major announcements from a Qualcomm standpoint. There were some announcements on some
Yeah.
modest desktops with X Elite stuff. I think it was Asus. I think it was Asus had an all-in-one couple of form factors, but
That's a
nothing
mini
really.
desktop, yeah, which is actually a big deal. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's true. But Leonard, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they've set the tone for 2025. Quite honestly, last year was proved that around
Show me. Yeah,
because the year before at Snapdragon Summit, there was a lot of skepticism in the room that the Orion cores, which were just announced, and the X Elite would actually deliver on promises or expectations that were being set. And so I think 2024 was, hey, you guys proved that what you preached was actually true in many regards, right? I think they're going to continue to set the tone and pace in 2025, regardless of whether or not they made an announcement or not. And exactly to Francis's point, again, the PC market is a difficult one that is still pretty well entrenched in by Intel. And it's not a trivial effort to displace Intel in many of the markets, even with all this drama that's going around that brand.
yeah,
And again, going back to some of the bets that they've made and the accelerations that they've done on their product roadmaps to get to where they are today, it it creates a really interesting competitive environment that we can look forward to and observe in 2025. So it's going to be really, really exciting because obviously AMD has game in this as well. But I think there's it is definitely a different PC computing world that we're looking at from a silicon perspective.
In the few minutes we have left here, I want to shift gears just a second, just a bit. And well, assuming that my voice still stays with me, is that what was interesting was that companies like LG, if you went to their keynote, which I did, and Samsung as well, now because a lot of the focus was on consumer electronics, TVs, appliances, especially appliances with LG, and and I kind of really like what they're doing in that both companies, especially LG, are trying to soften the messaging around AI, and especially LG. LG was calling AI affectionate intelligence, and I really thought that was kind of clever, and that they're trying to for especially average consumers who they think that AI is going to take over the world, or it's going to create a bunch of bots that are going to, put us in jails. I mean, really kind of really sci-fi type of stuff.
Reach.
Yeah, exactly. So I was really kind of impressed at that, and it's actually a bit Apple-esque in that way, in terms of trying to make AI a much more, comforting. Hey, I can wrap my hands around it. AI can really, serve us in a positive way and make our lives easier, more productive. Any thoughts on that, in terms of just the whole kind of the softening of the AI messaging thing that seems to be going on? Francis, I'll start with you.
I think I mean, there could be that aspect too, Mark. I think in general, what I saw more is companies, whether it's LG and Samsung, or really across the board. One of the themes that I saw at CES was everybody trying to figure out, okay, both from a consumer and an enterprise standpoint, how do we take all of this AI goodness and apply it to our lives, get value out of them, and generate value. To be honest, and how do we make money out of this?
Yes.
And I think so. I think our LG's approach to that is one approach that we saw, but a lot of the conversations I had really focused on, okay, what's the business model that any given company is trying to apply, and when it comes to consumer facing, it was really around AI as an assistant to your life, whether it's personal or business. And I think that's where that to me that's how I see something like that affectionate, intelligence approach is, in the bigger context. I don't know, Leonard, what do you think?
Yeah. One of the things that I tuned into, and it's not just the LG presentation, but if you looked at a number of their competitors in, the, let's call it the smart living space or smart home space, they were looking at bringing the models on premise or within the home network.
Hmm.
And and surprisingly, and actually very refreshingly, looking at how do we foster privacy, protection, and isolation within the household, and use this AI in a way where a lot of the orchestration and management and intelligence that you would expect getting in the cloud can be brought into the home in some sort of hub. There was a lot of talk about Matter. So there's this reconstituting of this interest, or this, let's say, mandate toward revisiting smart home with the new technology. Now, where it goes, we'll see. But I think that might have driven some of the messaging that we see, where they're trying to make things more personal, a la, Apple.
Hmm.
They do that, and so there may be a fast following or a co-following um, uh, uh, impetus for this, but we'll see where it goes, because this stuff is. I think maybe they're getting a little bit cautious, because a lot of R&D groups and product teams that are developing these applications, they know what they're starting to bump into the limitations of this technology. The stuff is not perfect. It's still experimental, yet people are trying to productize them. So I think they're being a bit cautious, but this is a good vector and direction for innovation, I think.
Yes.
Whether or not you can realize capabilities are reliable enough, we'll see. But I think there could be novel product and systems architectures that can come out of this. Let's call it a smart home 2.0 exploration.
I think, Leonard, you hit the nail on the head. It wasn't just privacy; it's personalization,
Yes.
where it kind of goes hand in hand. But having it on device, in the home, or on the PC or the
Yeah.
smartphone, it's all about personalization, and then also personalization of preference, but also context. Whether it's environment or what people like to do from a from, again, a preference standpoint or what's happening in your local environment. I actually saw that auto is a big thing, which we didn't even touch on yet. And I don't think we have time to touch on, Mark, but auto CES has become kind of an auto tech show. It's not where the OEMs release their latest model years, but it's where all the technology going into the cars are going. And I saw that AI and auto as well, is that personalization aspect is something that they're keying on
Yes.
in terms of both AI, but also the need for transitioning to SDV.
No, Francis, you're right. CES has really never had a reputation for being an auto show, but the technology component has been there for the last several years. And since CES is at its heart a technology show, you always see interesting things. I mean, even LG themselves had they had some content that they announced on their
It,
video.
it's a big one now. I mean, and it's actually competing with Detroit to some degree. All the auto tier ones and even the OEMs, like West Hall, is basically all auto.
Yes, correct. Oh yeah.
So
Let me. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I just want to give you the word because we do have to end this in a couple of minutes. Let me give you the last word, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I thought because of sort of this diminishing interest in electrification, I thought it was less of an auto section. It's now you're starting to see industrial stuff coming. It's becoming more of a, let's say, um, a a, a stage for industrial companies to come in and tout that they're technical or they're technology companies, which I think is it's kind of now it's all been played out already, but you still have the likes of Caterpillar and John Deere still showing up at a consumer event to show off that they're a technology company, and that whole program campaign, archetype has been something that's been around for now going on 3 years. So I don't know, but I think it's becoming less of an auto company, to tell you the truth. Infotainment, maybe not, but
Why don't we end it right here? We're going to have more discussions at many of these topics, I can assure you, especially on how AI is progressing throughout the 2025 year. So, Leonard, Francis, thanks for participating in today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the Next Tech podcast part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast, or use these convenient on-screen QR codes to connect with us. You can also follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at the handles below. Guys, thanks again. And I'm hoping that when I do this CES next year that I'm not going to get sick.
yeah.
It's like cough.
Hand sanitizer.
Very happy.
I'm going to bring some emergency with me. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.